So this video is going to be a bit more personal for me. For those that know me, I'm an illustrator at heart and love doodling. And obviously my love of gaming, I thought I'd try to make a fight stick that can hold my artwork. This video is sponsored by PCBWay and they're integral to this video, but more on that later. This video was actually going to be a lot shorter. I bought one of these Arcade Fightsticks from AliExpress and it just did not feel great and thought let's make one instead. First of all, I had to model the case. I was thinking of a right trapezoid, as I was envisioning that you can lean on the slanted piece. But in hindsight, the slope was too steep. The top part would be a 300 by 200 piece of perspex. That should be big enough for some artwork and fit all the buttons and joysticks inside, but not overly big that it is hard to carry around. I also made sure that the edges are rounded, so it's comfortable to rest your arm and hands on. I also made a hole for the connector, but soon you'll see why I should have made more holes. But more on that later. Splitting the case in 6 parts so that my 3D printer is able to print a case definitely took a while. But once printed, it came out pretty well. Assembling it for a rough fit and buying some perspex online to size, it seemed to go together well and I was pretty happy with it. Here I'm sanding the edges so that the parts will be able to bond well with the epoxy resin and piecing the parts together. Leaving it for a few days for it to cure, I started on the artwork. I decided to do a Street Fighter and Tekken piece, as it's probably my 2 favourite beat 'em up games. There was a cross collaboration of the game called Street Fighter Cross Tekken, but this piece isn't based on that. And please sound off in the comments if you know the characters. I've also uploaded a full video of the sketch here, so if you don't want to hear me babbling, please click here. I think I found it a lot more easier to draw the Street Fighter characters, as I've drawn Street Fighter for a very long time. So you probably can see I'm a bit biased with the amount of time I take on Street Fighter characters than the Tekken ones. You'll probably notice I've redrawn a few characters as well, like Chun-Li. I was really unhappy with her look and went for a different pose. I also replaced June for Kazuma Mishima, as I wanted a contrast to Bison on the opposite side. After popping into my local Snappy Snaps to get it printed, it's time to cut it out, and this really feels like college or uni days, where I'd spend countless hours cutting and sticking things for my coursework. Unfortunately, you can see the Tekken side is on the right with all the buttons, so some of the characters have parts of their bodies chopped off. Ensuring the piece is able to fit correctly with the case, I used the top case as a guide. Next, I thought about using this plastic backing for some extra security, but I'm not really sure it needed it in hindsight. Again, measuring out the piece and cutting out the holes for the buttons. So the next part was pretty nerve-wracking, drilling the holes for all the buttons. After putting some guide holes, I then used the stepper drill for the buttons, and this was the part I knew it wasn't gonna go well. Not worrying about the look of the case, I carried on and made the rest of the holes with even more cracks. Here I'm marking and drilling the holes for the corner screws and joystick. And that should be all for the top case. For the joystick board, I went with the Brook wireless fighting board. One of my main requirements was for this to be wireless, and this was probably the best products out there for fight sticks. Separately, I also bought the Brook fighting board cable. This made things so much easier to assemble everything together. So now comes assembly. In goes the charging board, which just uses 2 screws. Next, the Brook fighting board and all the buttons and joystick. As for the battery, there's no way of switching the board off. There's no indicator light or anything. So I had to attach a switch onto the battery so we can manually cut the power off to the board. And after that, everything can be assembled, screwed down and tested. So there's two ways you can connect this. Currently I'm using my laptop to test everything. So here I'm connecting it via a USB cable and it gets recognised as a PS4 controller. To get it working wirelessly, first power on with the power switch. It acts like a PS4 controller, so you would click and hold the PlayStation button, which in my case is the left button, along with the share button, which is my right button. It should appear as a Bluetooth gamepad controller. Just connect it and it should work like any other controller. As I said, this video is sponsored by PCBWay. When thinking about how I should print my case, I wanted to see the quality of their CNC instead of getting it 3D printed. CNC, or Computer Numerical Control, is the automated control of machining tools by computers and is used to automate things such as drilling and milling. Think of it as the opposite of 3D printing. Instead of adding things to an object to create your model, it starts off as one large object and then drilled out to make your model. They have different materials you can pick from, such as aluminium, stainless steel, brass, copper, titanium, mild steel, alloy steel, tool steel, spring steel, ABS, and so on. The file format for CNC was STEP or an STP file. For me, I just had to export the model as the STEP file in FreeCAD. Once you've uploaded your files and selected your material, just go through checkout and wait for a PCBWay representative to review the model. And after about 2 weeks, I received this. The quality of the model was way better than I thought it'd be. Strangely, I thought there would be layers from the CNC machine, but it was completely smooth. One thing I didn't anticipate, but obviously made absolute sense, was the weight. My 3D print is obviously a bit hollow inside and isn't a solid piece of plastic. With all the components inside my case, it weighed just over a kilo. The PCB case weighed just under double of my case at 2 kilos. So remember I was saying I did not anticipate the extra holes? That was for the power button and antenna hole. I had sent the model off to PCBWay as I was assembling my 3D printed case in parallel, and obviously only noticed when it was too late. But drilling the holes was absolutely fine and just made a lot of mess with plastic shavings going everywhere. Another thing that I overlooked was I made the top case the same size as the bottom case, so the fit was way too snug and just did not fit well. Taking a sander to each of the sides, I managed to get it to fit just like a glove. Once all the sanding was done, the next thing was painting. I started off with a base primer and not bothering to do the centre as it would be hidden anyway. I then used some metallic blue paint once the primer dried. Hitting it with 2 coats ensured that I didn't miss any spots. And lastly, I used some gloss lacquer to protect and seal the paint, as well as giving it an extra sheen. And the final finish looked okay, not great by any means. There were some bubbles formed after I used the gloss, and you can see streaks of paint as I sprayed the paint in layers. So if anyone has any advice, I would definitely take it on board next time. So lastly, I would just need to transfer everything from my case to the PCBWay case. As you can see, I've not added the plastic back in as I don't think it really needed it in the first place. So once all assembled, I also wanted to install this Street Fighter 6 button I bought from my Japan trip. I just had to unplug the connectors and pop off the button and simply fit the new one in. And once all the screws were on, I can call it done. Well, there is one thing, and that's the 3D printed Capcom logo to finish the piece. I filled the centre with some yellow acrylic paint and spread in the paint with a toothpick. I didn't record it, but I also covered the top layer with some epoxy to give it a nice glossy sheen. I do also want to add a drawing at the front, so stay tuned to see that video. I also stuck the supplied Brook sticker on the back of the case as well. And now I can say it's done. Time for the montage. I had so much fun doodling, I made a second one. This one was Capcom themed, so again, if you recognise any of the characters, sound off in the comments below. And now for some gameplay. Thought I'd keep this one in and just watch my frustration. Now for my quick review of what went well and what could be improved. I would say overall I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I like that I'm able to stick my artwork in pretty easily, and I do like the heft of the fight stick. It just looks ridiculous when compared to my other arcade fight sticks, and the weight is such a surprise when people first use it. I think PCBWay done an excellent job with the finish and looks extremely professional. Also, having a wireless fight stick with 3000 mAh battery means I probably wouldn't need to charge it that often. I can also use the fight stick on a PS4 or Switch as well as my PC. Now for the cons. First off, as I said earlier, my spray painting skills are not up to scratch, so unfortunately the finish of the arcade is pretty rough. The model itself can be a turn off to many. It is massive and there is an extra slanted piece that does not help with anything. Maybe I could cut a section out from the inside to house the board and battery. This definitely would have helped with the height of the whole thing. Lastly, my biggest gripe was the Brook board. It did work flawlessly with it being attached to a cable, but once you try to sync it wirelessly, it really is trial and error. Checking the manual, it does have the ability for you to attach some LEDs, which would be used as status lights. I think it would really benefit for those who are planning to get this board themselves to add that. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Catch you on the next one. Cheers. Yeah, but you would run out. Oh, that was good.